So we're moving on to the final section of the summit, and I am really thrilled to introduce our chair for session 6, which focuses on behaviour change, making reuse second nature. Céline Deschamps is City2C's marketing manager with over 10 years' experience in marketing roles in FMCG and hospitality sectors, and behaviour change focusing on reuse. At City2C, she's been leading impactful initiatives aimed at reducing plastic pollution by encouraging reusables and aimed at and implementing strategies that shift those oh-so-tricky consumer habits. So who better to bring this next session to life? Céline, welcome to the stage. Please introduce your panellists.
Thank you, Nat.
Yes, let's give them a round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you, Nat. I'm Céline. I'm delighted to be chairing this session, which is all about behaviours. And throughout the day, as you have seen in the many panels that we talked about policy support, we talked about the economics involved. A lot of them talked about consumer behaviour. And we know the appetite. At City2C, we've been monitoring consumer readiness around refill and reuse for the last decade, and the results are clear. You know, like 3/4 of people demand and say that reusable packaging needs to replace single-use packaging in the next 10 years. But how does that behavior actually happen? And that's hopefully what we are going to be talking about today. And I'm delighted to be joined by two wonderful speakers that are behavior change experts, but also experts in reuse in this panel that will explore actionable insights and hopefully some key levers to be able to make reuse a natural part of consumer behaviors. But to have a little kickstart, we just wanted to have a brief understanding from the audience around here, like who has arrived here with a reusable or refillable bottle? Yeah. Probably.
Who hasn't?
And who hasn't?
Thank you.
I would say not so much. So to get a kickstart, we can also say that and celebrate that we've come a long way. Like reusable and refillable is a behavior that is starting to be part of our lives, and it's about like how do we, take it to the mass and amplify this in many different product categories and sectors. So today with me, we have Thomas Webb. Hi. Hey. Thomas Webb is a professor of psychology at the University of Sheffield with a huge amount of expertise in understanding consumer behaviors, most recently focusing on reducing plastic waste. He's led the Many Happy Returns project and now studies behavioral issues as part of a European project for reusable packaging system called the Body Pack. And hi, Thomas.
Hi.
I wanted to ask you the first question around, in your expertise, what psychological factor most influence, generally speaking, whether people adopt sustainable behavior and sustainable shopping behaviors?
Sure. Well, I'd like to start by drawing a distinction between motivation, being motivated, motivating people, and translating that motivation into action and behavior. And I think our problem is with the latter. Behaviour change problems can be understood from this lens. Is it a problem with motivation? Have you got a group of people who are interested in the problem or are willing to do it? And I think we're not super motivated. It's not the most important thing for people to reduce plastic waste, to engage with reuse systems, but they are willing. And I think we're pushing against an open door, but we are definitely not translating that motivation into action. And that's because, and we'll come on to this, I think the systems are designed in a way that they present barriers to people and thwart that motivation. So we know from, bitter personal experience as well as scientific research that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. The irony is, about 10 years ago, I decided to write a blog for Psychology Today, and I called it The Road to Hell is Paved with Good Intentions, so it's just called The Road to Hell. And Psychology Today, when they wrote to me and asked me to write this blog, said, we want you to write just aim for about once every 3 to 4 weeks. So in 10 years, I've written twice. But I think that demonstrates, and I stand it up there as an example of the intention-behaviour gap. And I plan now not to write anymore because it stands there as testament to the gap. And I think that's the problem we've got with reuse, that people are willing, but it's just getting that willingness into action.
Absolutely. There's always a sort of gap between what people say and what people do, which is exactly what we need behavior change experts around the table to be able to nudge, gently nudge certain actions. I am also here with you with Professor Sally Becken. Hi. So Sally Becken is a plastic innovation expert and the founder of the UK Circular Plastics Network. She's very passionate about achieving zero waste future in her work, but also personal life and efforts, with a personal story about Van, which I can't wait to hear about. And she's played a huge role in leading innovative UK material, packaging, zero waste communities. So when I was doing some research and preparation into this panel, I could hardly count the amount of reuse project that you've been involved with, which is quite impressive. And just talking to that say-do gap and sort of enhancing and guiding those behaviors, have you seen in your expertise any particular communication strategy or some nudges in the shopping area that has proven to be the most effective in promoting sustainable behaviors and uptakes?
Okay, I just want to say expert in behaviour. If anyone is, that would be amazing. So I always hate the word expert because you can't be an expert in everything. I'm a bit of a pedant, I suppose. I'm really lucky to have been involved. And when I say I'm not in the projects, I've just got visibility of lots and lots of reuse projects, because what I do in my role at Innovate UK Business Connect is help people apply for the funding. So I get visibility of a lot of projects. And the other couple of things that I just wanted to say why I might be here on the panel is, in my life, I think I can't stand waste. It's been reuse my entire life, from when I was knee-high to a grasshopper. And the third reason is that, as well as my current role at Innovate UK Business Connect, I'm involved with a behaviour change company called Peasy. So, I'm getting to the behaviour thing. But in terms of answering your question, the one thing that sticks out to my mind is we've been manipulated into decades of consumerism, essentially. We're, bombarded all the time with messages. And so bombarding us with the right message will give us the behaviour change. I'll just take the example. I'm not going to name the supermarket in case I get it wrong, but I think I know who it is. They put some apples in their grocery department in bags, and they put apples that were unbagged. And it said £2.50 a kilo for the unbagged, let's say, figure's probably wrong. What they found is people will pick up the bag because it had a price on it and they knew how much it was. Whereas when you look at apples, you don't know how much it weighs, so you're thinking, I've only got a tenner, and how many apples shall I take? Because I don't want to be embarrassed at the checkout. When they put 5 apples for £1, people started buying the apples without the bag. So it's making sure you get the right messaging to make people change their behaviours. That's just one example.
Yeah, absolutely. And also just minimizing that effort, or the perceived effort. People are busy, and just making sure that we're clear in how we're guiding those people is so essential. And which comes to the different barriers that we see and people in the busy lives of people. And that might be a question for you, Thomas. So this panel is called, get it right, Making Reuse Second Nature Changes Behaviors at Scale. So in your opinion, what are some of the key barriers, actually, that we have to making reuse a natural part of consumers' behaviors? And can you give us some insight into how you think we should overcome them?
Sure. I think one of our starting points for our work in this area was that reuse requires that things are reused by definition. When things are reused, used multiple times, they sometimes show signs of use. And that's really a difficult thing for people. Who goes into the supermarket, looks at the display of baked beans? If there's a dent in one of the cans, we don't take it. If there's a blemish on a bottle, we take the one that isn't blemished. We have been socialized and now afforded the opportunity to have virgin material almost ubiquitously. And so if we move away from virgin material, we need to know what these signs of use, what people think about these signs of use. And so we did some experiments on that. And what we learned is that people do not like signs of use. Absolutely. Really cool paradigm where you morph in 100 steps a perfectly virgin, clean container into one that shows signs of use. It's got some, it's fully hygienic, but it's got some scratches on it or whatever. It shows signs of use. As soon as that container perceptibly showed some signs of use, people were unwilling to reuse it. So you could go, right, well, we need to sort people out. We need to tell them this is clean. So Sophie Pott, who works with me, who's on the third row, and I did some experiments where we went, well, what we need to do is we need to put some posters up. And we need to tell people, look, reusable containers are properly washed. This isn't just, someone rinses them under the tap and then serves them to the next person. They go through exactly the same washing process. They are fully hygienic. Do you think that helped? No, it made it worse in one case. It put the idea in people's head that it might not be hygienic.
Yeah.
So what you don't want to be doing is creating a barrier which you then require behaviour change specialists, of which I'm supposed to be one, but that is testament to the fact that you can't make it work, and there's lots of examples of this, then have to try and solve. What you want to do is get the behaviour change experts, the psychologists, into the project early, get them to try and help you understand how the people are thinking and behaving with respect to the issues, and then design the system so that you don't present those barriers to people. There are materials we can be using that don't show signs of use. Simple things like that, or maybe it's even as simple as the catering staff, if it's for takeaway food, take out the containers that show potential signs of use, so you never get that barrier.
I'll just add to that, if I
of
may.
course.
Everyone in this room is from a hugely long line of very, very successful berry collectors, right? If we hadn't collected the best, biggest berries, we wouldn't have survived through the winter, and we wouldn't have got to this stage of civilization. So there's hard wiring in here that you've got to work against. And I've been looking at people's shoes today. I'm not going to single anyone out, but for me, the sign of someone who's pretty sustainable is someone who's wearing a pretty old, worn pair of shoes. You're all going to be looking at your shoes now and think, what did I put on today? But once we start looking at people who've perhaps got a darn in their clothing,
They're
these
the
are
newest shoes I've ever seen.
they're second hand. We'll get onto that in a minute. But I think that when we as a society look at people who are portraying behaviours that we all think, oh, that's great, they've got something that I can see they've loved and kept. Look at my handbag, it's in the right state. But I shouldn't even say that. Look at my handbag, I've had it a really, really long time and I'm proud of it, yeah? So it's thinking about how we all perceive each other and what we consider to be good behaviours that I think is really important. So in terms of other incentives, Peasy, the company that I'm involved with outside of my Innovate work, is using nudge theory to get people to behave. So you can incentivize people to do the right things. One of the offers that we've got is called Litter Lotto. It's an app you download on your phone. It's free. If you take a photo of the item that you've got and you show that you're putting it in a bin, so for me, capture the material first. Do not let it become a fugitive in the environment. We offer £1,000 a week as a prize to one of those pictures taken at random. It's been absolutely brilliant. We've had over, I think, 15 million pieces of litter bin to date. What we've got now is we can show people which material to put in which bin, so you can increase compliance for material and you can reduce contamination. So behaviours is nudging, as well as, there's so many levers that you can pull. We have to do everything that we can.
And what you just said about the incentive is sort of echoes the sort of win-win situation. Like, you're doing your bit for the environment, you get a reward, which is just to take an example, this is exactly, in a retail setup, this is exactly what this bottle is doing, really. It says, return it, get £2 off the next purchase. These sort of behaviors, this one is an M&S one, but it's sort of incentivizing, encouraging people to do their bit, but people might be actually not driven by the environment as a primary behavior, but most importantly, to get their £2 back. Is there something sorry, I'm going back to Sally. Is there something in those other elements, with your experience working for Peasy, other elements to consider to making that value proposition very easy, very engaging, to drive trials, to drive people to take part in this sort of reuse initiatives?
Well, it's interesting. I'm not quite thinking about the bottle, but we all reuse and refill quite a lot of things. I mean, I consider a car a very unique and functional piece of packaging. It takes me from A to B and protects me, and I refill it. So it's not that we're not used to doing these things, it's just we're not used to doing them in the items FMCG, for example. Most of today we've been talking about FMCG, but we've got an activity in Innovate UK Business Connect, which I lead on, which is called Longer in Use and Reuse, and it's across all sectors. So longer in use and reuse for your lighting, for the RSJs that are in the floor of this building. It's really important to think of everything. And we do have behaviours. We're just not used to applying them particularly to what we think of our fast-moving life. And on the go, I think things have changed, certainly in my lifetime. As a child, I'd have had to wait to get home for a drink. Not because my parents were cruel, because that's what happened. We could go for a few hours without having a drink on the go. You know, things have changed absolutely massively, and I think we can think differently, and we are capable of human beings of behaving in another way. I probably haven't quite answered your question, Celine. Sorry,
but to delve into what you just said, Thomas, around that idea of like people might do certain behaviors that aren't labeled as reuse, as sustainable, but people do it anyway. Do you have any sort of insights onto this and how and what might be the opportunity for the marketeers around the room or the sustainability leaders to graft onto these sort of behaviors?
I thought I did. Well, the problem is I think our norms are quite contextually bounded. So we might be very good at reusing things in one context. So if you went into a restaurant, sat down for your meal, and it arrived on a plate, you would assume that plate had been used before. Right? You go get a takeaway meal from a kebab shop, and it arrives in a container. That container you assume has not been used before. Why do we have this obsession with reusable cups for coffee, but not for milkshakes in McDonald's, and not for soft drinks? It's like we pick these sectors and we make behaviour normative in those sectors. And so the reason I started by saying, I don't know whether it's the case, because what seemed obvious to me is we need to show people the transfer. We need to show how it's almost a bit weird why they do one thing in one area and not something in another area. So another one of the posters that we put up as part of our work, I don't think we wrote this one up, was restaurants don't bin their plates after you've eaten from them, so why do you bin your takeaway food packaging? Had no effect on people. So I don't know if there's something about that people struggle to transfer the norms or whether we need to start the norms. But I really liked what Margaret said at the start of today, because she was saying, stop aiming for the low-hanging fruit. Because a lot of the work we've done on reuse, I'm like, well, hang on, we can do this for coffee cups. Let's do it for milkshake. But actually, maybe we shouldn't be trying to go for the next obvious thing in the line. Maybe we need to go for something that's the most challenging thing. And if we can make the most challenging thing work, then everything else is going to seem really simple.
So you sort of like counter the point of, was it James earlier today? And I was talking like, let's not start with milk, but let's start with like, but. I
was trying to agree with Margaret, but.
It is quite, which goes into
but
tapping
I didn't realise
into.
I was disagreeing with James, but okay.
Tapping into positive emotions. Is there something that you mentioned as well around to drive those behaviors, you need to probably celebrate the good parts, the wins, and not necessarily what I just did, tapping into the negative elements of like don't do this, don't do that for behaviours.
Yeah. So one of the teams we have at the University of Sheffield works on the language, the way in which people talk about plastics and the associated work. Yeah. And so if you haven't seen it, there's a really nice guide they wrote about how to talk about plastics for businesses. You can find it on our website. It's led by Professor Joanna Gavins. But one of the key messages there is, don't tell people what not to do. Tell people what to do. And once they're already motivated, give them concrete actions. And the reason you don't tell people what not to do is because that's all that fills their mind. And don't think about white bears. Oh, boing, there's that white bear. That's Dan Wegner's classic illusion of ironic thought suppression. So tell people what you want them to do, not what you don't want them to do. And your point about making people feel proud, I think that's really good. And make people feel, one of the most powerful drivers of behaviour is we want to feel good about ourselves. And that's often why we bury our heads in the sand. I wrote a paper 10 years ago now called The Ostrich Problem. And that's that people don't like to think about really how they're doing and how they're doing towards things that are actually important to them. And the reason we don't like to think about how we're doing, whether we're saving enough money for our retirement and things like this, is because often that news is pretty unpleasant. And it's unpleasant because human beings are unrealistically optimistic. That's very functional to be optimistic, otherwise you'd never try and do things. People will talk about depressive realism, going off on a bit of a tangent here. But the point being that actually we're really, really motivated to have a positive view of ourselves. So if we can reflect on those small wins and think, I did good there. It was only a small thing, but I did good there. that might be enough to drive behaviour.
I couldn't second that more. I'll third and fourth and fifth that. I think it depends whether you're a glass half full or a glass half empty person. But yeah, that I always think I've done a little bit. It's good. Every little bit helps. I'm definitely that sort of person, and a kind of just do it person. There's a lot of procrastination I find in all walks of life. So just do it and see how it works and try and build on it and try and be as positive as you can. That's, you know, applicable
And
for
accept
reuse
mistakes.
too. Yeah,
I tried. That was
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Give it a go.
That's great. And to go back to this guide about how to talk about plastic is such a wonderful element. It's like really easy to use, which brings me to you both were involved in, you know, or overseeing or getting the knowledge of cross-collaborative projects. What's the role of like academics and scientists and all those guys for this cross-collaborative project and to help sort of brands and retailer actually deliver the storytelling power that they know how to do this? But what's that role of academics in the future for reuse projects?
Evidence.
I believe academics and the data, you are the people who will say what is true, and everything should be data-based, evidence-based. I don't think organisations such as Innovate UK or anyone who's got a vested interest at the moment should be saying anything. I think the academics have almost a role to play to step up and say, this is what we've determined, and be brave about it and say what you're actually finding. It isn't that easy, though, because, oh my goodness, it's a moving target. You can calculate an LCA today, and something will change tomorrow. So,
Can I just do a quick plug for a piece of work that Sophie and I are working on? So, how many of you either operate or involved in reuse systems or know about reuse systems that have some sort of incentive, financial incentive or loyalty points to get people to go with the reuse option? Or maybe you include some sort of penalty. For loads of you, how did you make the decision about how large an incentive to go with? Why was it 50p, 20p, 1 loyalty point, 5 loyalty points, what the penalty was? It's all guesswork. I'm not going to just put words in your head. Sophie and I, there is no systematic review of the effects of different incentives and penalties on reuse behaviour versus single use. We've been working on it for 2 years now. If you've got data or ideas, please talk to Sophie.
The Restart project has just opened a scheme in London for repair vouchers. So this is reuse, longer in use and reuse. It's come from work where they understand that if you want to get something repaired, you need it to be accessible all the time. Let's say your kettle breaks down and you've got to wait for that one repair cafe on a Saturday every month. And you need a cup of tea within an hour or two, right? You know, you're not going to wait that long. So having it available all the time for repair and available all the time and accessible to you is really important. So what they've done is they found locations that have skills to look at items that need repair. They're giving vouchers to people to go and use. So businesses with a skill set who are open all the time on the high street, accessible, and available to you, can use these vouchers, get paid for the repair work if possible. And if it's not, then you'll go and buy a new one. So that is an incentive, but hopefully that will change behaviour. So that's probably a great place to look for your data.
How large does the voucher need to be? That's the question. This is what we seem to be guessing.
I'll give you the link, and you can. Yes, you're right. When they model it, they can come to a point that actually works. But starting,
it goes back to testing and learning. Like, we're not here to give. There's no one size fits all. It's about getting you on board, getting that data, testing what works and what doesn't, and then take it from there. And many products may have different scenarios as well. So yeah, I think it's just committing to getting that data, getting that insights.
And it allows you to test what seem like intuitive ideas. You know, our experiment where if people are worried about hygiene, we'll reassure them that it's okay. That's not the way to do it. You know, you need to test what seems obvious.
Yeah, cool. I think I'm getting a little sign, so I'm gonna wrap this up into the last few questions. I think, Sally, if there's one thing, like that's the end of the day, if there's one thing that you want people to live with in terms of behaviour, or I know you have a long list, what would that be?
I've got 3 things. I'll say really quickly.
Go for it.
66% of everything that we need to do to reach net zero is behavioural. So lots and lots of the innovation has happened. It's about societal and behavioural stuff. I have a vision for reuse, and it's based on everything I've read and heard and reviewed and been involved with. And I actually think there's an opportunity for a new brand to come. So there are loads and loads of zero waste stores where people with the right behaviours, you all put your hand up, would go, and that needs to be a brand that other people are not using go, oh, what's that? A bit like Greg's, right? Greg's went from nothing to a lot really quickly. Let's do it for zero waste stores and refill. But the one thing that I want anyone to go away with, share your stories with your friends and families. What are you doing? I just took my 25-year-old caravan that I've repaired for years, I ripped it apart and I put it in the side of a van, and I now have a camper van. But longer in use and reuse, just do it and share your stories, and other people will think, oh, maybe I could do that, or they got pleasure from that. There's a reason for doing it. So share what you're doing with friends and family, and hopefully it will all grow.
That's social proof
Thank you,
and
Yasmin.
mere exposure. Is there anything that you want to add to this, Thomas? In terms of like the one thing that you want people to think or do, actually.
I think I want people to stop being so obsessed with trying to motivate people. I think we want to assume that most people are willing to do the right thing and translate that motivation. And so making things easy. And I don't want to go back to nudge. I know you're a big proponent of nudge, but nudge was, was developed as, changing behaviour without changing minds, and it was almost like it seemed coercive. Nudge isn't coercive, because nudge doesn't work if people don't want to do it. You don't start going upstairs because they're painted like escalators if you can't, don't want to go upstairs, if you're happy where you are. The point about nudge is it pushes people in the right direction to do things they already want to do. So let's make single use a little bit harder, make that the more effortful option. That's what we need to be asking for. I want my drink, my takeaway in this cup. Let's make reuse the easier thing. And if that's literally as simple as put the single use things behind the counter and the reusable things at the front, let's just go for that. Yeah,
perfect. And if I may add for last thought, my takeaway and what I want the people to get away with is, brands and retailers have done this for hundreds of years. They have the tool, they have the marketing strategies to do that. It's just about building that reuse equity and using exactly the same thing to do what they do best. And we're here to sort of inform what are the specifics of it and how we can guide those people. But I think we can do this for the benefit of people, profit, and planet. Thank you very much. I think we're getting to questions, aren't we? Great.
Hi, I'm Violet Ross from Resource Futures. So I've got to admit, I'm a little bit of a skeptic about gradual behavioural change and people doing the right thing and being motivated. And I know that we're in a Western society where liberalism is very on a pedestal, especially in Western societies. And I wonder what you think the role of forcing people to change and stricter legislation, fines. For instance, in the Netherlands, you get fined if you put waste in the wrong recycling bin, things like that. So I wonder what your view is on that, and if you would have any recommendations if you had to be put on the spot by me. Thanks.
Problem is, I might sound very right-wing here.
Just go for it.
Massive fan of legislation and removing choice. They are.
I think I agree.
The psychologist just want, the psychologist doesn't want to be tasked with changing people's behaviour. Let's let somebody else do it.
And so we're all human, and sometimes we don't make the right choices. So if we have the data which we know what the right choice is, then I think we should legislate for that. I think it's important. It's not that bad if you walk down the supermarket aisle and there aren't 500 different sorts of shampoo. I asked my mum once, and she said there were two. There were two sorts, and that was it. So she survived. She's got lovely hair. Yeah, so I would legislate, yeah.
Hi, it's Louise Cowan from Local Partnerships. We've heard a little bit today about how we need to be visionary and try and raise the ambition when we're thinking about what reuse systems we want in the UK. But when we're thinking about that from, I suppose, a government perspective, perfection can be a bit of a barrier to progress. And so I just wanted to pose those almost two opposing thoughts of view and to get your opinion on what is the right way forward with where we are now in the UK. Thank you.
I'm happy to start. It's really difficult when you're trying to transition to a new business model, and it's been mentioned before today that government wants growth. And it's not really clear, actually, that transitioning to a more sustainable society and reusing things for a longer time will actually give you growth. So we need to find a way that the business models still support companies to create jobs for people so they can have salaries, and that's the difficult thing. So making reuse mainstream, for example, the example that I used around repair, there's still a method for companies to get money by that. If repair becomes second nature, or the first thing you think of, they can still be rewarded for the repair in the same way that they would have, they probably end up with more income than they would by getting a cheaper kettle or whatever, imported at very low labour costs from another country. So I think it's possible, but I have to look at it really, really carefully, so that we can still generate, jobs for people, and they can have an enjoyable career and life. I mean, I'd actually personally find pleasure from mending something that was broken rather than just selling a new one that was off the shelf. So empowering people to use skills, I think, is really important.
Hi, I'm Anna from Eunomia. I just wanted to kind of reflect a bit about lots of the kind of environmental initiatives that we're seeing coming out at the moment, and a lot of the public backlash we're seeing against various different initiatives. And if you have any thoughts on ways to kind of make this less severe, or how we can kind of make some of these be better received, because I think we're seeing, or there seems to be a bit of a pattern with how this is happening.
Do you have an example of the...
I guess just with, so for example, with recycling, with the 7 or 8 bins thing, or in Bristol with closing streets to cars, so they're thinking about closing Park Street to only have buses. And so just on a wider scale, kind of, if there's anything from a behaviour perspective that could be done to change this.
I mean, I'm not, just off the top of my head, I think it's to do with it not being tangible, the benefits. I think what's tangible is the suggestion that you now have to sort your waste into multiple bins. We're now going to close the street and you can't drive up it. And what you're not seeing is, well, what is actually the net benefit of that? Let's say, I guess maybe there's an argument for closing the loop. Yeah. This is what was achieved through doing this. Some really nice statistics, wasn't there, around the pandemic, with, how wildlife came back into cities. Little things like that, where it's like closing the loop, seeing the positive impact of a change.
Maybe be able to communicate it, right? And I know that we had a full conversation last year about the power of information, and we're talking about reusable packaging, returnable packaging. If we don't even tell people that we're doing this in order to reduce waste, some people don't even know what this is for. So it's about probably talking about that aligned vision, even with consumers. We said that everyone needs to have the same goal, the same targets, but we also need to consider people actual human beings that have also their own beliefs, and they can understand exactly what we're saying, I suppose. But
yeah, I just agree. I think human-based stories that show exactly why you're doing this. For me, if I knew that putting stuff in 7 different bins meant that I had higher rates of compliance and lower contamination, and that my efforts were going to produce something valuable at the end, I would feel very positive about that. But again, speaking to people who probably feel very similar, it's those that don't feel like that need to see why it's important. I mean, I really don't like any media or programs that will perhaps pick up something that's not going wrong, because people tend to get that negative, I'm not going to bother recycling now if they hear that something has gone into the wrong country, and it might only be a very small part. Anything that makes people not do the right thing is not helping us at all. We've got to do more positive stories about why we should be doing this. And I actually think probably that there's quite a bit more positive change than there was sort of 5 years ago. I think someone mentioned about the open door. I think if we keep pushing from every single angle, policy, business, behaviour, stories, it's a bit like, Elvis. I'm going to pick up on Elvis again. So no one knew Elvis was brilliant before Elvis was brilliant, but people talked about Elvis, they bought more of his records. We didn't have to push from social media, but he went viral and everyone changed their behaviours and rock and roll was born, as it were. So why not that happen with reuse? Yeah, sorry, James. Was it James who mentioned Elvis before? It just struck me.
It's reminded me of a project where we really tried to make the benefits tangible. It's a project, is Carla still here from Hubbub? There's Carla. We worked on this project together. It was the Compostable Coalition, so not reuse, sorry, but compostable waste. And people were like, well, why should we compost our waste? And what we did is we delivered bags of compost back to the residents to say, well, this is what's been produced. It's the way of closing the loop.
Yeah.
Oh, that's brilliant. Well, I think this is, we're getting to the end, but it was really brilliant panel. Really enjoyed it, and I really loved all the questions. Thank you very much for coming.